Hello and welcome to this virtual school assembly for Bishop Wordsworth for the 6th of May 2020. This Friday will mark the 75th anniversary of the end of the war in Europe. Just as in 1945, May the 8th has been declared a public holiday to celebrate a momentous event in the history of Britain and the Western world. After 6 long years in 1945, the conflict, the struggle was over. The pain, the bitterness, the grieving and the suffering would persist for a generation. No one escaped unchanged, and the fabric of society of Europe would not be the same again. But the armed confrontation was at an end. In the Pacific theatre, war would persist for another 3 months, but here it was finished at last. 6 years is an eternity for some. Children are born up in Britain in the 30s and 40s feeling the threat of war and then the very real danger of attack. Families have been torn apart by an aerial assault, conscription, rehoming and the threat of invasion. Grinding poverty combined with the catastrophic effects of bombing in major cities like London, Bristol, Liverpool and Coventry combined to make life intolerable. It's easy to understand why, in contemporary pictures, some people simply look stunned or disbelieving at the news of peace. And then, just as easy to comprehend is the euphoria, the pure joy and elation that took over as a nation celebrated the dawning of a new era of peace. For a moment, the fears and uncertainty for the future were forgotten as a nation united as one. The films of the time, staged though some are, convey that feeling very well, symbolised by the stalwart, unyielding figure of Churchill, but personified by the impromptu, uncoordinated congas in the streets. And the next slide gives you a link to some Imperial War Museum footage of the scenes on 8th of May 1945. This 75th anniversary will not be as we might all have expected. The streets will be lightly used, the skies will be clear, and most neighbourhoods will be quiet. But that doesn't mean that the war generation have been forgotten or taken for granted. Our digitised world makes modern history all the more accessible, all the more real, and all the easier to understand. War and the impacts of war may have gone for most of us, but the veterans of the war generation are still with us today. VE Day lives on in the lives of many, and the pictures and films tell the story of thousands of words and deeds and lives. The last slide shows a prayer of St. Ignatius Loyola, which we use very often to conclude whole school assembly. Thank you for listening.